It's so great to see everybody's faces. I'm Kathleen Trapphagen, the facilitator of the OST Impact Group. And let's start out by throwing in the chat who you are and your organizational affiliation, and one thing that you're really looking forward to about the weekend. Starting with an asset-based frame here.
I'll just say a couple more words. And first of all, I want to apologize. I have my phone where my laptop usually is because we are having wicked internet connectivity problems in my house because school started this week. So we've got 5 people trying to Zoom at the same time. So, well, I just wanted to get us underway and say thank you to Kathleen and thank you to all of our speakers today. This is a really, really powerful group, and I'm excited to see so many people joining. This has been a group that kind of convened for the first time just as COVID descended on our nation, and has just built incredible momentum around an issue area that is just so important. So we took a little break over the summer, and now just as school is starting in a lot of places, we are taking another look at out of school time. I know that there's lots going on with this group and that we are seeing membership just kind of grow for these webinars. We anticipate doing them every other week. And I'm going to turn things over now to Kathleen to get us underway with our fall series. Thanks, Kathleen.
Yeah, thanks, Celine, and welcome everybody, and thank you so much for taking the time. I realize how busy everybody is, and especially for those of us on the phone who are in a practitioner role, special thanks to you because I'm sure you are incredibly busy in trying to figure out how to support families and kids as schools start in whatever way they are starting wherever you are. So I'm going to quickly turn it over to Dale Anglin, and thank you, Dale, for taking on the role of moderator this morning. I had just said to Elizabeth that she's one of my very favorite philanthropoids, which is a word I learned from the Rakes Foundation folks. So this topic we're talking about today is one that came up when a group of folks met over the summer to think about the biggest priorities for sharing and learning and talking and moving forward for this group. And so this one is about the fact that we all know that at the end of the day, no matter what philanthropy can do, we will not have enough money to provide high quality youth development and learning opportunities for young people until we can really put more public money and more wins in our column over the long term. How are we going to do it, and what's philanthropy's role? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So thank you, Dale. I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you so much. And nice to see people from all over the country. And greetings from Ohio. So as some of you probably know, we're celebrating a major victory earlier this month when the Department of Education signaled that the 21st century Learning Center dollars could be used to support children attending learning hubs while their schools operate remotely. I don't know if some of you, but we've given dollars to some of those learning hubs locally. This decision followed much earlier guidance by other federal agencies, lifting restrictions on child care development block grant and after-school snack resources, all thanks to the After School Alliance and everyone else whose advocacy has helped make these victories possible. Jody Grant of the After School Alliance estimates that about $400 million of COVID relief has supported out-of-school time programs. So it's important to recognize the power of our community advocating for critical resources to take care of kids during this pandemic. Yet at the same time, we know we have to win more new dedicated public revenue streams for out-of-school time programs so all kids can access high-quality learning and engagement. As funders, we have an important role to play, individually and as a collective, funding policy, advocacy, and field infrastructure that connects programs into a strong collective voice, which is vitally important. And I know many people in the meeting today fund in many of these areas. Without infrastructure, this work would be impossible to do. But we have a number of our funding partners who, to be frank, only fund direct service. And they don't quite understand the importance of the policy and advocacy because they almost see it as an either or. When they fund policy and advocacy, that's one less kid that gets a service. But what we know is over time, when you fund policy and advocacy, eventually you can scale and get more kids to have services. I'll just quickly, before I introduce our panelists, say a little bit about what we're doing in Cleveland. We are funding academic learning pods. We've come together as a collective of about 10 different public sources, intermediaries, some grantees, to do that work for about 1,000, 1,500 kids. But what we've learned in the space, to be frank, is even within the OST field, we don't all work together well. And out of every crisis comes an opportunity. And out of this crisis has forced these different groups, even though I've been trying to get them to do this for 3 years, to work together in a way they never have before. And so I feel like we've got a window right now where the world thinks after school is important. They don't even know how to use the term after school, right? What does that mean? It's not even after school, it's during school. And so I think one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this topic in particular is because the people see us and this work, I think, right now in a way that they have not always in the past. And when you've got that window, you want to take advantage of it. That means legislators, that means any type of funder, public, private, all of that, right? And so it feels like this is even more important right now. And the last thing I'll give as a word of caution before I introduce our speakers is I tried to do some of this work in Newark, New Jersey. I'm looking at my partner here in New Jersey. And we had a wonderful statewide after school initiative going on for about 3 to 5 years, no, about 5 years. And to be frank, many of us at the time thought the legislators understood this and it would go on forever. And they did not, and it did not. And I will say directly, it was partly our fault. We did not do a good job of being a public-private partner. And so we in the foundation world have to figure out how to work with them. They're not going to figure out how to work with us. It just doesn't work that way. So I'm so interested in hearing more from Elizabeth and from Ryan. I'll introduce Elizabeth and then she'll turn it over to Ryan. Elizabeth Gaines is the Children's Funding Partner Project founder and director. Ryan Lugalia-Hollon, do I pronounce that okay? Is with Up Partnership, executive director, and we thank them for taking the time to be with us. Elizabeth is going to start by explaining the Children's Funding Project strategic approach to working with communities on long-term financing strategies, including generating new public funding. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. And Dale, I got to say, I just literally a second ago got an email about New Jersey using some of their CARES Act dollars to support school-age care. So there's not a lot of places around the country that are doing that, but they apparently, the good work that went on over the past years has left a residue because they're putting money there. So so great to be with all of you, and truly it's great to be with you because I feel like I've been in a lot of conversations with early childhood funders over the last number of months, and you all are my people. So I actually, speaking of 21st century, my very first sort of foray into the field 25 years ago was in running youth programs, and my youth program became one of the very first 21st century community learning centers in the country. So it's kind of coming full circle for me. But so did a lot of that work. I then went on to my home state in Missouri to advocate for child and youth development in the tobacco settlement dollars, and then spent the last 14 years of my career at the Forum for Youth Investment working with Karen Pittman. And I think you guys have had Karen on, Kathleen, to do some things with this group before. Learned a ton there, worked a lot with governors' children's cabinets and mayors and county executives' children's cabinets, trying to help them coordinate and align sort of up and down the pipeline. So everything from early childhood through opportunity youth and everything in between. And it was at the Forum that I incubated this project. And let me go ahead and pull up my slides here. Okay, so I can't walk and chew gum. Hold on a second. All right, so this is the info on the group here today. Do you need to say anything about this, Kathleen? Or are you guys good? All right. So the work that we do at Children's Funding Project which is honestly 2 years old officially. I was incubating it for some time at the forum, but the work that we do is built on work that I've done with state and local policymakers to coordinate and align. And I always felt like, we do all of this good work to understand the policies, to think about how folks could align, to think about where we could tinker around the edges to braid and blend funding. And we would rarely have conversations about how to grow the size of the pie so that the various points of the field weren't sort of coming to a head when they would go to talk to policymakers about, the resources that were needed to do all of the things. And so I grew tired of that and felt like I wanted to start an organization that really laser focused in on the money. So, a lot of folks will talk about what gets measured gets done. My whole mantra since starting this is what gets budgeted gets done. And one thing that is important to me in starting this organization has been, really committing to staying agnostic where up and down the pipeline a particular community decides to get started. So we've let folks sort of let that bubble up naturally at the local level, and knowing that we're always going to come back to the full spectrum. And it turns out, though, that the early childhood field has been very ready. And so as the new organization, I've become very quickly as expert as I can in early childhood policy. And so what I want to make sure happens, and I think, as Dale said, we're in a really important moment right now where we have a chance to break down that barrier between the early childhood field and the school age field and the youth field, right? And really think about adults that work with young people and how we can make high quality, well accessible, compensated workforce for all the adults that care for children. So that's something that we are committed to doing. And so the organization itself uses these sort of 4 policy levers that I've developed over time, watching places have success and documenting that success and helping them. And they're not necessarily linear, but we do think it's very important that you find the resources that you have. In other words, sort of get a baseline understanding of what are you currently spending on kids in your community, that you align those dollars and make sure you're, really being as efficient and effective with the dollars as you can. And that once you've done that and you've sort of named the gaps that you have, that you start to go out and do the hard work of generating new dollars to fill those gaps. And then making sure that in terms of activate, that's this space of, do we have good ways to administer funds? Do we have governing bodies that are representative of the people that they're serving? So these are the kinds of things that we're helping folks to do. And we've probably worked with over 30 places since we started about 2 years ago, and they're all coming at this, from a different angle and starting in a different place. But the bottom line for us is building the capacity in our field to think about financing in more sophisticated ways. And, a lot of the hurdle has honestly been in getting people's mindset to change. I think we've come from such a scarcity mindset and really this notion that, we couldn't possibly ask for more right now, or it's not the right time, or we need to get in line behind somebody else, has become pervasive in the sort of child and youth field in our thinking. So that's one of the big things that I've been trying to tackle. So in this idea of find, I'll just give you a very quick overview of find, align, generate, activate, and some of the things that we've been doing, and then we'll turn to Ryan. We've been doing fiscal maps for a long time. I've probably been doing them for 15 years. And these examples that you see of why you might do it are real. And I've been focusing in the last couple of years on how do we maximize funding opportunities once we know what we're currently spending and we know what we should be spending. But then since COVID, I will say that there are some really urgent reasons to have this kind of fiscal data that I'll show you. And one of them is just having a baseline. Coming out of the last recession and the ERA funding, we didn't really do a good job of tracking the baseline funding before that happened. And what we saw was state budgets really shrunk, and the federal dollars filled the gap for a little bit, and the state budgets never went back up to the levels that they should. So we want folks to have a good handle on, nope, this is what we were spending, and we need to quickly get back to that. And then this notion that, we are seeing just a whole new scrutiny on municipal budgets in this country, and really helping people think about whether it's police misconduct with budgets or, you know, what have you, that we are being clear about what we're spending money on and what we're not spending money on. And so, you know, having fiscal data, I think is a critical piece of the puzzle. This is just a screenshot of some work that we are really in the midst of doing in New Orleans, where there's a mayor who said, you know, I want to have a really good handle on this. I want to understand what we're spending on our kids so that we can start to make better investments. And this is an interactive tool that we help folks to create, and it's got many pages to it, and you can do all kinds of fun things and click on links and it'll pull up, you know, the specific information that you're looking for. We also are helping them to think about not only the fiscal data, what's the city spending on kids, but how are kids doing at the neighborhood level? And so they've got these interactive maps that they can use to understand then, are we putting our resources into the neighborhoods that have the highest need? And you can really start to get to better equity that way. So I could do a whole webinar on just this piece, and we won't, but just wanted you to know we're trying to help folks think about getting a better handle on the resources they do have. And then when it comes to alignment, I will say, you know, you may be sitting in some of these cities or counties that have a mayor or a county executive or a superintendent that has said, we need to work better together to bring all of the different agencies that serve kids into a common sort of cabinet. And they're calling them different things in different places, but we do convene this network if you happen to be in a city that has an interest in doing something like that. And the goal there is really alignment, and it's about how do we start to use our resources in the best ways we can. Another thing that we did very quickly is when COVID hit, we realized, like everyone, we needed to pivot, right? It's the best word of the year. And so we sat down and ended up writing a 40-page guide to navigating all of the new and then all of the new flexibilities that the federal funding was unleashing. And so it's a very detailed guide. It goes through and provides you links to the various guidance on what you can and can't do now with the various funding streams. One of the exciting things that we've been doing is tracking a lot of really good examples of folks using funding streams that are new or using new flexibilities to do innovative things. And there is so much innovation happening out there right now. It's pretty impressive. And then the way, if you were to go into this guide and try to sort of navigate it, we try to make it as easy as possible to sort of click to the sections you're most interested in. So we have a section on early childhood funding, a section on middle childhood funding, older youth funding, et cetera. One cool thing that's happened is a number of states and communities have actually used this guide and gone, okay, wait a minute. Beyond the funding streams that naturally go to kids, there are these CARES Act, you know, coronavirus relief fund dollars that states and cities have, and they've gone and advocated for, you know, set-asides of those dollars to go to things like childcare and youth, you know, workforce development opportunities, et cetera. So there's a lot of innovation happening. Quickly on Generate, I would say, you know, for the 25 years of my career, we've primarily as a field focused on this left-hand side of things. You know, these are like our go-to moves in terms of funding child and youth services. And we have been at Children's Funding Project trying to just get a best examples we can find out there of doing these things on the right-hand side. And I'm just going to touch on the first one just to give you a sense of the exciting opportunities that are out there. So we've spent a lot of time working on this concept of local public dedicated funding, and each of those words is really important to us. And I won't go into all of the detail on why, but at the core of why for me is that this is the way we're going to be able to build a constituency, a children's constituency in this country, is by working at the grassroots local level to build the kind of political power that we need and build the excitement that we need among people that care about kids to really make a difference in this country. And we know that it's not just going to be federal dollars, it's not just going to be state dollars, it's also got to be local dollars and private dollars that, you know, come together to make whole. And then just to give you a little bit of glimmer of hope, we've got, you know, a bunch of places around the country that have actually done this. They've created these local dedicated funds by going to the voters and, you know, letting them choose on a ballot to raise some sort of a tax to pay for children's services. And these are the places that have done it. It's not just on the coasts, it's really all across the country. And okay, last thing I'm gonna do, and then we're gonna turn to Ryan. I'm sure I'm way off time, Kathleen. So just to give you a feel in the out of school time space of what this can look like, this is an example from Wayne County, Michigan, the Detroit area, where we did a whole bunch of fiscal mapping, very detailed work, put on one page, here's what your, you know, current investment in expanded learning and out of school time. And I think Malia from Ralph C. Wilson Foundation is on the line here, but Ralph C. Wilson Foundation and Skillman Foundation invested in this work because they wanted to have this baseline understanding of, you know, okay, who's investing what in paying for this system? And so this is what we found. And then what we did was use the good old Wallace out of school time calculator to sort of say, well, if we looked at just the children in poverty, and that's like the lowest bar here, right? Children below the federal poverty level, what would it take to fund some sort of expanded learning opportunities for all of those kids in this community? 92 million, seems like a fairly big number, right? So they're currently spending 38 million. They should be spending at least 92 million. They've got a $54 million gap. So what do? Let's name it, and then let's move on to identifying the revenue options that exist in your particular context, because it's different in every single state and community, what you can and can't do in terms of a new revenue. And assess that and figure out what are the pros and cons of each of these, and not be afraid of, you know, standing behind some of these ideas. And so they went out and actually gathered 90,000 signatures from voters in Wayne County, and are in the process now of pursuing a ballot measure that would generate, in this case, it was the property tax, close to that $54 million number. And so, you know, it is doable, and we, I think, need to think big about these things. And I'm going to pause there, Kathleen, so that we can move on to Ryan, but wanted to very quickly give you hopefully a hopeful story of what is happening around the country. And I can come back and give you an even more exciting little nugget at the end if we have time. So Ryan is one of the places that we've been working deeply in San Antonio with him, and he can describe some of that work. And just tell me to go to the next slide when you need me to.
Okay, cool. Well, I have to say, Children's Learning Project is hands down. We work with a lot of implementation contracted partners, and CFP is by far the best that we work with. Elizabeth's team just enables us. I have a really amazing team who could not do the things that we're doing, but for the deep partnership and capacity from CFP. So this is the find, align, generate, activate process that Elizabeth talked about represents a lot of new muscles. And no matter how sophisticated you are in systems thinking and systems change, and it's just incredible to work with Elizabeth and her team on this to help build those muscles. It's kind of like imagine an amazing personal trainer to do comprehensive financing planning for children and youth. So if you'll move to the next slide. And then just a word on my background. So my after school program that really supported and, you know, in many ways elevated my life and perhaps saved the life of other friends of mine during tough adolescent years was the Douglas Community Center in Louisville, Kentucky. And through that got my first job as a 14-year-old at a day camp called Camp Taylor in Louisville, and went on to be in the youth development field for a long time, and lived in Chicago for many years and led youth violence prevention work for the YMCA. So I really appreciate the Trenton playbook that was shared. And then I moved to Texas in 2015 and became the first executive director of our out of school time network, Excel Beyond the Bell San Antonio. And then in 2017, I took over as the executive director of our Strive Together backbone. And it was about a 9-month process, but we merged our out of school time network into our Strive Together backbone. So we are up partnership, and our mission is to ensure all young people are ready for the future, and without exception. And we have 4 systems change networks. So those are Diplomas, which is focused on Latinx student success; Excel Beyond the Bell, which is focused on making sure every young person has access to the high quality programs and relationships they need to thrive; My Brother's Keeper San Antonio, which is focused on removing obstacles to the life and educational success of boys and young men of color; and Our Tomorrow, which is a youth voice and youth leadership network. And all of that is supported by our board of directors, which includes our local superintendents and university executives and business CEOs and early childhood leaders and out of school time executives. And if you'll go to the next slide. So Excel Beyond the Bell, our partners, we have 48 organizations, from, Boys and Girls Club, which serves 9,000 in our community, and Girl Scouts, which serves 12,000, and Boy Scouts, which serves 19,000, to Ella Austin, which serves 100, and Excel Beyond the Bell San Antonio is a table where the big and small leaders and agencies can all sit together equally to push on capacity building, strengthening their workforce, growing access, and growing power. And we have 9 independent school district partners, all of whom we have strong data sharing MOUs with. And we serve 80,000 young people, but we know that's a fraction of what's needed. And it's been really cool to be with the network for 5 years and to see the growth in many, many ways. And if you'll go to the next slide, Elizabeth, I'll walk you through just some of the things that we've done. So, for over 4 years running, we've built an educational success dashboard where my organization, one of the reasons we did the merger is my organization has a data shop, the team. And so with our data sharing agreements with ISDs, we basically match the student ID numbers of out of school time participants with the district students who are and are not participating in out of school time. And we build tailored dashboards at both the aggregate, the district, and the agency level. And we see consistent benefits really across almost all programs in discipline and in chronic absenteeism. And then some programs we see the big gains in reading and math, and that's more variable. We have Richard Tegels on the call, who is a board member and I think board chair of the Texas Partnership for Out of School Time, our statewide network, which has been an awesome partner and is increasingly a partner as we do the advocacy work. And the Text Post put out a set of quality standards that we adopted and ran with for 2 years before we pivoted a little bit. And we pivoted to what we realized as a network, and I'm sure y'all have seen this in your cities sometimes, is that we had too many things going on. So we still have a great, awesome partnership with Text Post, primarily around advocacy, but we needed to focus in. And so we've focused a lot of our network strategies around a partnership with the Search Institute and developmental relationships, which is what's behind this tagline here, is really equipping not just our programs, but also our city with the capacity to build high quality relationships with young people. So in 2017, we did a cost benefit analysis for the sector. In 2019 onwards, this is what I was talking about, the pivot to developmental relationships as our primary focus in terms of defining program quality and then capturing the outcomes of that in the dashboard. In 2019 onwards, we're building our capacity for youth voice and youth leadership. And one of the things we love about the Search Institute frame is the focus on sharing power with young people, because this is what we're talking about today. In some ways, is it's a conversation about money. And relatedly, it's a conversation about power. And young people are a part of how we hold that power across generations. And then most of what I'm going to talk about from now on is the fiscal map work, which we completed earlier this year, and the fiscal alignment task force that we're launching. So if you'll go to the next slide. So this is our fiscal map. You can find it. I'll put it in the chat real quick. You can find it on our webpage. If you scroll down a little bit, it's just below our college readiness dashboard. On that And then you'll also see below the fiscal map on our website a service map of 500 plus service locations that we've mapped in our community. But this is just telling us, like, we decided to take a comprehensive approach, so not just city dollars, not just county dollars, not just private philanthropy dollars or state dollars or federal dollars, but really mapping all of the origin points of child and youth funding that we could for our community, to understand how much are we spending, so that we know what the gaps are and what the deep needs are. And we mapped much more than this, but what made the cut after the exclusions was over $330 million. And we mapped it. One of the big lenses, one of the things that I would say, not just us, but leaders across San Antonio have gained from Elizabeth and her team's presentations is thinking about the foundation of an integrated financing plan is having shared outcome areas. And right now, all of these different funding sources are not thinking in terms of common outcomes for their investments. And that's like a necessary first step. So what you see here in the safe and stable, the healthy, connected, career-focused, academically prepared, and successful in college, those are the outcome areas around which coordination and a more comprehensive financing plan can happen and are possible and help our gap analysis. And if you'll go to the next one. So this gives you the scope and the parameters for our work. So the budgeted data, it primarily came from fiscal year 19. It was all funding landing in our city and our county. We were focused on not just the public sources, but also we got great participation from local philanthropy. The San Antonio Area Foundation is our community foundation, and they are the birthplace of the Excel Beyond the Bell work. They launched it in a really amazing way because, as you all know, with any collective impact project, you're either sharing power or you're not. And I want to applaud our community foundation and all the funders out there who really are committed to sharing power with your partners. I think that's been a prerequisite for our success in enabling really kind of a CEO roundtable that makes deep decisions together. So we focused on 0 to 18, and then there are those outcome areas that I talked about in our fiscal map. And if you'll go to the next slide. And so fiscal map was completed earlier this year. We have now launched our fiscal alignment task force. And this grows out of, in part, and it's work we were going to do anyways, but it's been tailored because of the triple pandemic that we're facing in terms of the public health crisis, the jobs crisis, and then the persistent pandemic of systemic racism. In response to that, our board of directors and 100 institutional partners across the city have all signed an equitable recovery pledge, which I just put in the chat. And these are our board signatures on that. And doing this fiscal alignment work was part of that equitable recovery pledge. And in the fiscal alignment task force, we're reviewing all the data sources. We're identifying and quantifying the gaps. We're identifying, and this is a big one, what are the funding streams that are likely to be impacted by COVID? We're working in the state of Texas, which there are many legislators who will, Richard can tell you this better than me, will take any excuse they can to be more austere. So that battle is ahead at the state level, and we're grateful for Texas Post's partnership and leadership on that front. The task force is also identifying flexible uses of funding and to make recommendations regarding recovery gaps and how to leverage flexibilities. And so this is we're taking the alignment phase very, very seriously. And we took the finding phase very, very seriously. It took us almost a year to get our map done because we went as comprehensive as possible. And our alignment task force has leaders from 50 institutions on it that are doing deep work. And it's almost one of the ways that Elizabeth's team talks about it is it's almost like a mini youth master planning process. But we're doing that, one, because we believe in the methodology that Children's Funding Project has put out in terms of first you find, then you align, then you generate. Our introduction to CFP actually came in, I think, 2017. Elizabeth was the first time I got to meet her, and she gave a keynote to our network at our annual summit, which was super powerful, which kind of really helped us see the wisdom of this process. And then because we're home to pre-K for SA and they have their reauthorization vote this November, we we don't want to move into a generate phase until pre-K for SA's renewal is secure. And so for us, we'll be finishing up the alignment process as that vote is hopefully renewed. And then we'll be looking at generate in 2021 onwards. And if you'll go to the next slide. So this is just how, in terms of shared outcomes as a foundation of coordination and comprehensive finance planning across funders, this is just how we defined our outcome areas. So you'll see the range here from young people are fed, sheltered, and free from violence, all the way to young people are forward thinking and developing career aspirations. And what I'll say here, and this is just to point back to the Trenton example, I think it's really important as we start to make the case for investment that we think across the many different benefits of out of school time. And anybody that's done a cost benefit analysis knows this. You know, you can make the college readiness argument, you can make the community safety argument, you can make the argument around supporting the current workforce and being the second shift for the current workforce. So all those arguments are really viable. And also I want to underscore Elizabeth's point around how do we create unity and common path across all of the sectors that are supporting children and youth, and make sure we're not getting pitted against each other. Dale was talking about how we can get pitted against each other at the agency level. That can also happen at the sector level, right? And so we've been approaching this in a way that's designed to try to avoid that. Can you go to the next slide? And this is just on the making the safety argument. This is something I pulled in from my Chicago days. I wrote a book called The War on Neighborhoods that's about the impact of mass incarceration on communities. And the only concept there I think you really need to be familiar with was no entry neighborhoods. We wanted to build neighborhoods where we didn't accept that the next generation would go into the criminal justice system, because that our criminal justice reform policy has been focused on re-entry for 3 decades. And all the while, new generations have been entering the system. So I really appreciated this map that my co-author built in a West Side neighborhood that's just looking at the catchment areas and the numbers served by youth agencies in one neighborhood in relationship to violence. And I think especially for cities that are having serious conversations around the future of policing and the dominant public safety model in your community, the conversation we're having today should absolutely, as was done in Trenton, should absolutely be at the forefront, because the capacity of communities to support their young people, especially in the hours after school and outside of school, is foundational to a less punitive or non-punitive community safety paradigm. So if anybody's doing that work as well, I just encourage you to connect those dots. And I think that's it. That's all I wanted to share. And I'll just underscore a couple things. One, so we would not have been able to do a lot of this without CFP. CFP has really helped us to take power more seriously, and to take that mantra of what gets budgeted gets done to heart. I think as a leader of our network and now as a leader of our larger education backbone, I got the data piece, I got the collective impact shared decision-making piece, I got the program quality piece and the shared professional development. I got all that, and we have wins in all of those domains, but I didn't get the power piece. And until we started working with CFP and the capacity to generate new funds, and to Dale's point, to grow access and create more seats, is directly tied to Elizabeth's point around we have to build that constituency for children and youth. We have to build a unified children and youth movement. And personally, like amidst all the divisions in our country right now, that's the thing that gives me hope more than anything else, is the possibility of really organizing everybody that cares about children and young people, which is almost everybody, and making that a prime focus in our work and in our discussions. That's all I got.
All you got, that's a lot. Thank you so much to Elizabeth and Ryan. And now we're going to take questions. If anybody wants to start, I just want to lift up one series of questions that's been actually happening in the chat. I don't know if people all read it. One was from Steve, I think, and it was answered by Elizabeth. Do you recommend creating new public funds locally focused on expanding learning and out of school time, or a more general youth fund that goes across education areas and ages? And I think her answer, Elizabeth, can you tell your answer instead of just
Sure. I mean, you know, again, we really try to be community led in what we're doing at Children's Funding Project, because communities are going to know best what they most need most urgently. And so, you know, kind of triangulating in on, is it the right moment? I also believe in being opportunistic, you know. I think, is it the right moment to get the public will to do something, to have a coalition of people that are ready to roll up their sleeves and do something, and of course to be, you know, guided by what your fiscal data is saying in terms of, are we way, you know, nobody's overspending, but are we way, you know, heavy on one side and not on the other, and figuring that all out based on your local context. But there's a few different things that you should use as factors to determine. But again, I'm a big fan of a broad children's fund because of that local flexibility that you have. I mean, the places that have these things and that have had them working for some time now have been able to respond in COVID in ways that are just a beautiful thing. I mean, you know, they can quickly get their board to, you know, release $500,000 new dollars so that they can put learning pods in place for low-income families that maybe don't have access to them. I mean, you know, like they're just able to do quick stuff that we all know you can't do when you're tied to big federal dollars or whatever, right?
So Steve also asked how the current issue with this 2020 census might impact the fiscal picture for all of us going forward, because that's so important.
Yeah, that's scary, right, Steve? I mean, you're probably following it more closely than I am, but it does seem like we run a risk of it being in a situation where we have even less resources to work with if there isn't some sort of quick corrections made. I don't know if you want to unmute and say anything about that, but.
Well, were you throwing that to me, Elizabeth? Or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we're in the final weeks on the census, although the court decisions may extend the time. And it is frightening that the effort to, I think, intimidate people may be succeeding in certain neighborhoods, which will impact the map. And I think the battle over the census, I mean, we should do all we can with our communications and our partners to give one final push for filling out the form. But probably the battle over the census is going to continue. There'll be efforts politically probably to suppress the data or only count citizens or something in reapportionment. And who knows if they'll then, depending on how the election turns out, be an effort to do a new census in 2022 or something. So I don't think it's over. I mean, we should give a final push, but we should keep an eye on it because that data drives a lot of distribution of money. That data is used for the planning process. And it is frightening that something that I used to think was, I mean, it's used for reapportionment, was kind of apolitical in the process, has been politicized, certainly beyond my imagination. And I don't think that's over. So it should be, in terms of allocating money and allocating power, is going to be a battle going forward, and is very frightening. I guess that's all I can say. Is it's very frightening what has happened and what is being done, and yeah, I'll leave it there.
And we need to be pushing hard on that, but then this is also another good reason to make sure you've got this local dedicated funding in your back pocket to be able to, you know, make up for some of that stuff. And there are equity issues, of course, that the federal government needs to be responsible for. So we shouldn't let them off the hook, but it is helpful in those communities that, you know, they know how many kids they've got.
And just to clarify, the first question actually was Rebecca Goldberg had logged on using my my name. So that first question on the children's funds came from Rebecca Goldberg at Bechtel.
Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. So we have an overall funding about, given where we are, even pre-COVID, what would be, Elizabeth, your recommendation to funders on this call for how to get other funders to understand the need for this even, because people do think they've got quality. I like the way you put it in buckets. You've got the quality piece down, you've got the programmatic piece down. This is a piece, to be honest, people don't even think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been most powerful for us is helping people to start putting the big number out there and quantifying it and showing and not being afraid to say what the big number is, because I think and I was guilty of it when I was an advocate, working with the Missouri state legislature. I was afraid to go and say, actually, what we need is $100 million, not $1.5 million. But if you don't go say you need $100 million, you're only going to get $1.5 million, right? So I think being able to stand behind some numbers is an important piece. And then there was something else you just asked, Dale. Question.
I'll just say I put out a big number recently for this, just for Cleveland and just for half the kids, just for the CMS, our Cleveland Metropolitan School District kids. And my fellow funders, education funders around the room, their mouths dropped. And someone took me aside and said, we can't do that. What are you talking about? That costs too much money. Just educate.
Well, when I mentioned it sounding like sometimes what I'm doing is therapy, that's the exact conversation.
We need help. We need help. There was a talk in the chat, I don't know if everybody saw it, about turfism. Once you do, even if you have a big number and you're trying to go for more dollars, how do you stop the turfism, I guess, in some way? Like, even like you said, somebody just said, you're waiting for the early childhood people, Ryan, to go before you move on the OST. How did you even get to that strategy?
Well, part of that's built into the structure of our backbone just because of who our board members are and politically what's viable and what's not. And to be honest though, Dale, like I'm not positive. There's a strong argument to make that it would have been better for us to go with them and not wait, not make it sequential, but make it concurrent, and that could have lifted the whole boat. So I came to that strategy a little more haphazardly than I would have liked to, and but what I think was underneath it was just trust in the process of not rushing it and saying, we got to complete the alignment work first to know what we're really going to push for, and then we can push wholeheartedly. But on the turfism piece, I mean, we have that happens all the time. Like I have large agency CEOs who are responsible for leading the advocacy of our network that are still prioritizing their own individual interest. And it's just about holding up that mirror, right? And I think as funders, you're in an incredible position that is a symptom of the scarcity mindset, to help them realize how big the pie could and should be. And one other thing I want to put out there, because this was very true in Chicago, I imagine this is true in Cleveland as well, is we spend so much money on mass incarceration at every stage, and not just policing, that's getting the bulk of the conversation, but juvenile detention and incarceration, adult detention and incarceration. So I put in the chat a map that we did in Chicago, and the book was about one neighborhood where every year we spend over $100 million just on adult incarceration. And so we have to, I think whether
Not
it's...
You're young, basically. It's, to use a bad analogy, it's don't eat your young, right? I mean, you should be turning your attention on a greater foe.
Totally, exactly. Yeah, and the common enemy has to be failures in human development and failures in the systems building to support that human development.
Wow. Elizabeth, could you talk to us a little bit about working with the Early Childhood Funders Collaborative and starting to see forward? Because that's often a part of the strategy, is you need that political muscle.
Yeah, so it kind of came at me before I was ready, because again, we're only, a year and a half old, and some funders in the early childhood space came to us and were like, okay, let's go. You said you think this is a good idea. Let's really do this. And so just a few months ago, we became official. Children's Funding Accelerator is a new 501c4, and we are supporting local ballot measures. There are still 7, maybe 8 on this November election down ballot. And I'll just tell the coolest story that I have seen so far, and that is in Multnomah County. And hopefully the fires don't cause a hiccup for this particular effort. But in Multnomah County, there were 2 groups that were on parallel tracks that we had worked with and talked to over the years leading up to this. And they were both going for universal pre-K in the Portland area. And one was led by the Democratic Socialists and young people who are like volunteer community organizers. The other is led by a county commissioner and, had all the research and the social venture partners and, various folks like that behind her. And we thought, oh my God, we can't support you if you have 2 measures on the same ballot for the same thing. Like, this is not going to work. And so we kept talking with them, and the socialists went out and during the protests in Portland were able to gather enough signatures that they did qualify for the ballot. And so then we had this situation where we're like, oh boy. And they got together and they got lawyers involved and they figured out a way to make one ballot measure. There is one ballot measure going on the November ballot. They're working together. They've got these deep grassroots people and then these top, grass tops people that are doing all the pieces that you need. And it's going to be a tax on high income earners over the top 5% of earners. It's going to bring in $200 to $300 million a year to pay for universal pre-K in Multnomah County. Like, it's got 70% of the voters favoring it. It's like, this is what we need to be doing. So we are, of course, supporting that campaign and a number of others around the country, and we're very excited about it. But the point, I guess, for this group is that's all early childhood funding, and so just to plant the seed. If anybody wants to talk about what that has looked like for those funders that are traditional foundations but now are doing this other piece, I'd be happy to talk with you about it.
Excellent. Any other questions for Elizabeth or for Ryan? I think we've got 5 minutes. Is that right, Kathleen? I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes. So I think maybe if we have one more question, I think there was just a point in the chat about young people and youth leadership. Maybe we could talk about that for a minute. Ryan, your thoughts, and thanks Brittany and Richard for bringing that up. And then I only need maybe 30 seconds to wrap.
Well, our tomorrow is our Youth Voice and Youth Leadership Network, and we've learned a lot about that. I think, so I'll share a bit on how we've approached it and then leverage points for you all. But for us, the out of school time field, high quality programs are really good at project-based learning. And project-based learning is a great entry point to youth leadership. And so how do you connect a project, whether it's a robotics project or a health project or whatever it is, to a policy opportunity or policy awareness or an advocacy opportunity for young people? So I think that's a clear bridge that we're deepening in our work, that I think anybody in the field can deepen. And then more broadly, yeah, I would really, anybody that has done deep program quality work in your community, and especially if you've aligned funding expectations to that program quality work, I would just urge you to make sure that youth voice and youth leadership are inherently and intrinsically part of how you're understanding program quality in your city and your field, or understanding program quality, or whatever it is that you're using as your accountability mechanism. Put that front and center. And the why seems clearer than ever. I mean, Stephen talked about some of the uncertainties with the census and things we took for granted, even 2 years ago. There's so many examples of that now from the post office, but there's also, the wildfires across the West. There's, our world is just really destabilized. And so adaptive leadership development of our young people has to be a top priority, because we're certainly not solving everything and we're going to be leaving them with a mess. So we need to help them get as strong as possible to survive that mess.
And I would just quickly say, youth involvement wherever possible has been happening in all 4 of those policy levers: find, align, generate, activate. I mean, young people rolling up their sleeves and digging into their municipal budgets, participating in the alignment task force in San Antonio, going out and getting signatures to put something on the ballot that's meaningful to them, that really affects their lives directly, and then sitting on some of these boards that manage the funds. Like in Baltimore, their youth fund has young people that sit directly on it. So lots of great ways to do hands-on youth engagement.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Elizabeth. This has been great. And you'll see in the chat, if you want to continue, their emails are there. And I'll turn it over to Kathleen.
Great, thanks, Dale. Thanks, Dale, for your elegant facilitation, as always. Very happy that you did that. So, folks, if we've got, I think, before the end of the calendar year, 3 or 4 more of these. So that's not enough time to really dig into the issues that we talked about today. And if you're interested in being part of a group that wants to really dig into what this means in your community and work and share and learn together with your philanthropic colleagues, just let me know, because I think that we have we can just do whatever we want to do. We can start a discussion group on this and bring Elizabeth in and see where we want to take it. So that's really an offer open to you. Let me know. My email is in the chat, kathleentrapp@yahoo.com. Someday I'll get a professional email, but haven't really gotten around to it yet. So just email me there and I'll figure something out. And other than that, join us for our next call like this. It's in a couple of weeks. We'll let you know because you're all signed up for the OST series. So you'll get some emails from GFE, and wishing everybody an excellent weekend. Thanks so much for taking an hour to spend with us today.